In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory forever.
Good morning, beloved brothers and sisters. So today we celebrate St. John Climacus, the Holy Abbot of Sinai. And we have one of the most famous icons in Orthodoxy here. An icon that everyone has seen. Many non-Orthodox people have seen this icon. This ladder stretching up to heaven, and all these monks ascending it, and these dark, black, evil spirits pulling them off the ladder and tearing them away from salvation. And you see Christ at the top of the ladder receiving those who are climbing, giving them his hand, receiving them. And at the top of the ladder is John, the righteous, the one who guides the people. And in the top corner, the other corner, opposite Christ, you see all these angels. And they seem so far away, so removed from the battle that's going on the ladder. And indeed, beloved, that's what it seems like to us. We fight our passions, and sometimes we think heaven is high and Satan is so close. My passions are so heavy. And this ladder that I'm climbing is very rickety, and I will likely fall off of it if I haven't already. And yet, beloved, this icon does not show the fullness of what goes on. It doesn't show the fullness, because the angels don't sit in some place doing nothing. They actually wage war. The saints also are not really shown. They don't show all of the saints that have been praying ardently for the salvation of the people. Right? And so this icon shows a truth. It shows the war and the fierceness of it, and those that are being pulled off. That's all true. It's completely true. There's much more to it than that. Unless we despond, we should hearken back to the time of Israel, the time when they, having crossed Sinai, having traversed it, reached the Jordan, and they were going to go into the promised land. And so Moses said, let us pick 12 spies, one from each of the tribes, and they will go and they will spy out the land, and they'll examine it. And so for 40 days, just like Lent, for 40 days they traversed the promised land and went through all of it, examining all the fortresses, the strong cities, but also examining how good the land was, and what are the crops like there. And they come back bearing massive clusters of grapes that are so large 2 men have to bear it. And they see all the good of the land, and they say, yes, indeed, Father Moses, yes, indeed, this land does flow with milk, and it flows with honey. But it is also strongly guarded, and there are terrible cities with massive walls and heavy defenses. And so the people began to quail. And these 10 spies, there was 12, but these 10 spoke up intensely, and they said, it is impossible to enter this land. It is impossible to fight with these people, and it is impossible to take it. And the people took up this cry, and they began to say, let us go back to Egypt. It is better for us to return to Egypt and to have died there than to have come across this desert, led miraculously by God, to this promised land, which is so hard and so strongly guarded. These 2 other witnesses, Joshua and Caleb, stood up and they said, this is not so. They said, it's true, the land is heavily defended. But God, who crushed Egypt, which is mightier than these people are, will help us to take this land. We should trust in him, and we should go. We should enter this land, and God will surely help us. And the people were so angry with Joshua and Caleb that they wanted to stone them. They were actually picking up stones to murder them on the spot. And Moses was beside himself, so was Aaron. And all of a sudden, God boomed from heaven. God spoke. Before any injustice could happen, God spoke. He basically said to Moses, this people should all perish now. And I'll create a new nation from you right now. And Moses said, Lord, forgive them. And Moses was so powerful that God in the next moment says, I have forgiven them. For your sake, I forgive them. But they're not going to go into my promised land. And so I'm going to wait until every one of these people from the age of 20 on is dead. Then I'll let their children go into the promised land because they were so unworthy. They were so cowardly. And when God meant cowardice, he didn't mean that the people could take the promised land by their own force. What he meant was they did not trust me. They would not trust me. They would not try to follow me. I did so many things for them. He said to Moses, 10 times has his people transgressed against me. Not once, not twice, 10 times. And this is the worst of their transgressions. And so it happened. All that God said happened. He waited until that generation died, and they brought the next generation in. And the Lord said, only Caleb and Joshua, the 2 faithful witnesses, the 2 faithful spies, they will enter. Moses even did not go because of some of his sins, and Aaron also. But Joshua led the people in, and Joshua was very brave, and he had a lot of manly vigor. And so when they drew nigh to the Jordan, Joshua said to the priests, you will take the ark and you will step into the Jordan. And as soon as the priest holding the ark of the covenant stepped into the Jordan stopped flowing. And the entire river stopped and piled up. And then Joshua said, I want the entire nation to cross the river now, on the dry side. while the priests hold back the river, you will cross. And so the entire nation of all the people crossed. And this struck terror into all the people of that region when they heard about this miracle. And they all saw it because they saw the Jordan back up. And they did not know what to think. And so they drew nigh to the city of Jericho. They drew nigh to it. Joshua leading this advance party of men, they moved towards Jericho. And all of a sudden Joshua saw this man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. And Joshua, this very bold kind of man, goes up to him and he says, "Are you for us or are you against us?" You can imagine he put his hands on his sword. And the man says, "I am neither." "So who are you then?" He said, "I'm the commander. I'm the supreme commander of God's army." And Joshua fell on his face. The tradition says that this was Michael the archangel. And so God strengthened him because when they reached Jericho, Jericho was unsurpassed in its defenses. It was a strong city. And the Jews had no tools to break the walls. But the Lord said, "If you will encompass the city and you will go around it once each day, and on the seventh day 7 times, the walls will fall, and you will enter the city." And that's exactly what happened. On the 7th day, they went around the city 7 times, and the priests blew their trumpets, and the people shouted at God's command, and the walls fell, and they stormed the city, and they put everyone to the sword. Everyone. Except for Rahab, the harlot, who had kept the spies for them. These spies that had entered the city. And what does it mean? It means that when God wars for you, your enemies suffer total defeat, complete defeat. What does the Lord say in Isaiah? He says, I'll paraphrase him, he says, "I am the Savior and there is no other, and no one can deliver out of my hand." What does this mean? It means no one can snatch the saved out of his hand, but it also means that if you're his enemy and you fall into his hands, who's going to save you? Who's going to deliver you? Who will save Satan from God's wrath when God puts his wrath on him? No one. Where will he flee to escape from God's anger? Nowhere. What will he do? Nothing, except perish. And so, beloved, Joshua, he takes the rest of the promised land with great force. He takes it, except those areas that are left, and he conquers. And Joshua, Yeshua, is Hellenized into Isus, which is anglicized into Jesus. So Joshua is the type of Christ. He means God saves. That's what his name means. The Lord saves. That's what Joshua's name means. Joshua wins this great victory, not by his own strength, but by God's power, and he trusts in it. And so Joshua, his bravery is not because he knows that his sword is sharp, but he knows that God is powerful. Has anything changed? Nothing has changed. The Archangel Michael hasn't departed. He hasn't gone anywhere. He still exists. He's the prince of God's people. And at the time, Israel was God's people. Now, Michael is prince also of the church. He governs the church, the residue of both the Jews and the Gentiles. He guards the church. And so do all the saints who pray for the church. And so they wage ceaseless war. And it is true that every day, the time goes by, Satan grows more intense. Why? Because he knows that every day brings the judgment closer and closer. And when the judgment comes, he will have no recourse except to receive terrible punishment. And so he becomes more crazy, more rabid, and more vengeful, and more wild each day. But the army of heaven becomes more bold because the victory they longed for, that they spent their whole lives fighting for, is coming closer and closer and closer. And so they become more bold, while the devil becomes more fanatical. Beloved, great are the saints of the church, so great are they. The Holy Fathers talk about one of the fathers of the desert who would pray so intensely, and the devil was so grieved by this man that he would become a lion. He would take the form of a lion, he would crawl up to the man, and the man would stand up to say his prayers, and he would lift his hands up to heaven, and Satan, as the lion, would take his claws and drive them into the man's thighs and hold them there. For as long as his hands were uplifted, so long would be the claws in his thighs, and the man would not notice. He would continue to pray. So great was his love of God. So great. And finally, when the normal time came, the normal time for him to lower his hands, who knows how long he prayed for, he would lower his hands, and the devil would pull out his claws. But not before then. And if a man like this prays so much in his life, do you think he would not pray for you if you were to ask him? Do you think he has grown slothful in heaven? He would not pray for us? Of course he would pray. If we asked him, he would pray. There was a tremendous bishop in Italy named Paulinus, and he lived in a very bad time when barbarians were invading Italy and all these dreadful things were happening. His people were captured by barbarians. His diocese was raided, and so they were taken as slaves, and he was ransoming his people by giving away silver and gold and all these things. And finally, he had stripped the episcopal residence of everything. There was nothing in there anymore. This woman came and she said, "Holy Father, my son has been taken by the barbarians. He's been taken away. He's going to become a slave." And Paulinus said, "Woman, let me see if I have anything for you." And so he went through his house, and he had not even a candlestick. He had given everything away. And so Paulinus said, "I will come with you, woman, and I'll give myself for your son." So he sold himself into slavery that the young man might be released. And he did it. This massive miracle. He was later restored. Everything was restored. The point being is that if this man was willing to do this out of love while he lived, would he not also love us? Has his love grown cold? Has he grown hard-hearted in heaven? Has heaven had a bad effect on him? No, it hasn't. He's become more loving and more righteous than he was before. The Archangel Michael, do you think that his bodiless arm holding his noetic sword has grown tired? It doesn't get tired. His hand does not get tired. He would long to get at your enemies. He would love to get at them. He loves to scrap with them and to fight with them, because this is what he's been doing since the beginning. He loves to liberate God's people from their enemies, and he would love to get his hands on your enemies and give them a beating. But you have to ask him. You have to ask him on bended knee. You really have to pray. See, the angels and all the saints who are so intense and so strong are present, but they cannot pull you up the ladder. They cannot pull us up. We have to climb. Will they help? Yes. They will definitely help. And that is what they long for. The problem is when a man does not make effort, what can they do? They're not allowed to help, because God says no. This man has to, of his free choice, make some choices. When he makes the choice, when he inclines his will towards the right, then help him. But you cannot force him. And yet, there's even leeway in this. The saints are alive today. They have so much power. There was this man in Romania who was, I think he was an atheist. I think he had fallen into atheism. I think his father may have been a priest, and he had fallen into atheism. He was in a bad state, and he was full of nihilism and anger and hate. He hated God. He hated the idea of God so much. He raged and raged and raged all the time. His brother said, "Why don't you come to this monastery and visit?" And I don't know why this guy came, but he said, "I guess I will come." And so he came. He came to the monastery of Prislov, where Elder Arsenia Boca is buried. He's not even a canonized saint yet. Not even canonized. But he's very powerful. And so this man, so full of hate, brought one of his hateful friends with him. And they were together in their communion of hate. And they didn't know what to do because they were out of place in this monastery. So they went and they sat under this nice tree. Well, the tree was right next to the elder's grave. They didn't know that. And they sat right under this tree. And this man said, all of a sudden I began to cry. I began to cry endlessly, like streams came down my eyes. And it was I had no way to perceive why. It seemed to make no sense. I just wept, and I wept, and I wept. And I looked over, my friend was weeping also. And it's as if this God that I hated so much suddenly showed himself to me. My mind was illumined for a moment. And I suddenly realized what God is like. How compassionate he is, how loving he is. How he has no ego at all, how he is so humble. How he is self-emptying. He is everything, and yet it's as if he is nothing. He's so humble. And the man wept, and he wept, and he wept. And now he's a priest in the Romanian church. Because of the power of the saints. He sat down next to the saint, and the saint could not endure to have this hateful man next to him. The saint said, God, illumine this man. Have mercy on him, illumine him. So even this man whose will was not inclined toward anything good at the moment, even he became a beneficiary of mercy. And God showed him mercy. So beloved, when Joshua crossed the Jordan, he knew he had a lot of help. Joshua was valiant, but he was also very faithful. He was Moses' son, essentially. He never left the tabernacle. Night and day he prayed. And when the time came, he was ready because he had such faith in God's power, and he knew the angels were close. And the Lord, so that he would not grow fearful when he reached Jericho, showed him Michael. He said, look at Michael, and you will have strength. And so, beloved, the ladder is very, very, very steep. It is very hard. I can't lie to you, it is. But the help you get from heaven is immense. It's immense. It's immense. It's immense. The saints love men. When St. Joseph of Hesychus was praying in his skeet, sometimes they would run out of bread. He did not despair, because St. John the Baptist would come and throw bread into their cell. Literally, he would come and he would throw bread into their convent, because their skeet was named for him. And so he took responsibility for them. He helped them. And so, beloved, pray to the saints. Pray to your patron saint. Pray to St. John. Pray to all the saints. And have great faith that they are close to you. Have faith that the angels are close to you. And when you fight against your enemy, fight with bravery. Fight with bravery, not with cowardice, but with bravery, knowing that you have help. You will be helped. God will help you up the ladder. And you have many, many, many friends. There are more friends that you have than you have enemies. And your enemies are very weak compared to your friends. Your friends are so much stronger. May God bless us, and may he grant that we may abide under the protection of the wings of the supreme commanders. And may we be guided by St. John Climacus, who shepherded many throughout his life and would not hesitate to shepherd us also. Amen.